Hey, what's going on, guys? I reviewed both a tilt and a shift lens on this very channel in the recent past, both of them coincidentally from the manufacturer Hori, but 7Artisans has sent me the first tilt shift lens I will have ever reviewed on this channel. This is their 50mm f1.4 tilt shift lens for Fujifilm X mount. There's all sorts of knobs and dials all over this lens. It's kind of cool to look at and there's a lot going on, so let's take a look at it. The first thing to note, it is fully manual, so there's no autofocus, no auto anything. You're going to be making all these adjustments yourself. Don't love the screw-on metal lens hood, but it is what it is. I wish it was just a pinch-on plastic cap. We have our aperture ring up front here going from f1.4 all the way to f16, and then we have our focus ring right here going from 0.5 meters minimum focus distance to infinity, and you can see the front of it extrudes and protrudes. Did I even say that right? It goes in and out whenever you focus. So then right here we have our tilt function. So you loosen this knob right here, and then actually on the bottom there is another knob that if you turn it will fine adjust. So whenever you're looking at the top there, you go based on these markings and you use that knob down below to fine adjust, and then once you have it you can lock it in place. And if you decide that you don't want it just to tilt left and right, there's this little knob right here that you can loosen, and this allows it, so say if we have it tilted all the way this way and then we want to turn it, we can now turn the lens like this, so we can tilt it up and down or whatever direction by tilting it. You can see I don't like how small this little knob, once you have the lens turned and you want to lock it in place, it's kind of hard to access this tiny knob to do that. And then our last adjustment is here on the side, and this is the shift function. This allows us to shift in a couple different positions to fix our distortion. You'll notice that the rear element is actually quite huge for an APS-C lens. This would actually probably cover a full frame sensor, but that's just so you can fully tilt and shift the lens without seeing any vignetting in the image. This ring back here, I mentioned it being kind of hard to tighten, and one of the problems is whenever you're trying to mount the lens or take it off the camera, if you don't have it tightened all the way, it'll just twist around and you have to grab it back there. But especially once it's on there, there's so little room to actually access that little knob to tighten that down. That is the one major design flaw, I would say, and one mechanism that's kind of hard to get to if that would stick out some more so you can access it. Because even now when I take it off the camera, it's still not tightened enough, even though I did my best. It's a little bit heavy because there's a lot of metal and mechanical parts happening there, but it is a pretty cool marvel of technology that you can get something with this much creative freedom and adjustability for this cheap. So honestly, good on you, 7Artisans. This is very cool to see on Fujifilm X mount. So now we're on to the image quality of this lens, and whenever you photograph with it wide open, it's dreamy, glowy, vintage. You know, it's not technically perfect wide open. It's going to have that kind of glow to it. It's going to have chromatic aberrations. It's going to have a lot of imperfections. But once you stop it down, even f2 is a huge improvement. But there's a good sweet spot kind of between f2.8 and f5.6, f8. That's going to be a really good sweet spot in terms of details out of this lens. It's obviously not going to be as detailed as a $1,000 prime lens from your manufacturer of the whatever camera you use, but it's going to be really good for a low $200 lens. One of my favorite things you can do with the tilt feature on this lens is make really large objects look like miniatures, and the tilt feature is also really cool for getting a foreground and a background element in focus in your image simultaneously without having stopped down the aperture to like f16. I thought some of my example photos made really good use of that tilt feature in showing how it can produce images that you can't make with any other kind of lens. But this is a tilt shift lens, and I've been only really talking about this tilt feature, but from my understanding, the shift feature on a tilt shift lens is meant to correct distortion. The shift only lens that I used, that I talked about at the beginning of the video from Hori, was an 18mm f8 shift lens, and because it was 18mm and it was a full frame lens, it's so wide that there is perspective distortion. So taking like architecture photography, for example, your lines will kind of recede away from you if you're tilting up at a building, so that shift feature kind of corrected that distortion. But because this 7Artisans lens isn't a wide angle lens and there isn't very much perspective distortion, I haven't found very much reason to use the shift feature on this because it's a 75mm full frame equivalent, this being 50mm on an APS-C crop sensor. So there is basically no distortion to correct, so that kind of rendered the shift feature does not have very much use in my experience. So let me know in the comments if there's a use for that shift feature that I'm kind of missing for a lens like this, but I felt that the tilt feature was a lot more usable and, actually did something, while the shift feature made no noticeable difference to the image. Anyway, I had a lot of fun shooting with this lens. I thought it was super fun to use. I like all the little dials and stuff, even though that some of them are kind of hard to access, especially this little one to rotate the lens once it's on the body. But this kind of thing is just something I nerd out about, having all these little technical abilities and little tweaks that you can make to really have full control over your image in a way that is not common and just not possible with a lot of other lenses out there. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, leave a comment down below, let me know if you have any experience with some budget tilt shift lenses or even some really nice ones out there, if you have experience with this one specifically and how it kind of sizes up to more expensive options, or just what you think of this lens. I'd like to hear your input. I always like hearing from you guys in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace.